有缘. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking your time to join us this afternoon for Dharma Talk, followed by an open discussion for all of us here to share insights, realization, and questions that we want to address. So today we will center on the other two divine abodes or immeasurable qualities, joy and equanimity, as we gave a talk last month on loving kindness and compassion. Very similar to compassion, which we've covered last time, joy is an all-encompassing quality for us to embody. Mudita means sheer joy, joy of joy itself. And like the ultimate form of compassion and loving kindness, joy arises from the nature of our body and mind, and not out of any emotional reactivity, which could be a coping mechanism. Pure joy should be from our nature because we are all born with this quality. We always have it with us. So we are starting with joy today, Mudita, which delights at the happiness and good fortune of others, and an antidote of jealousy and unsatisfactory feelings. Meditating on joy enables us to see the goodness in our own nature and in the world. The practice around mudita is direct and simple. We can, but we don't need to understand joy cognitively through words and languages. We cannot plan or contrive joy. It mostly comes without us thinking about wanting to have joy. Joy just touches our lives, eases the mind. To start, I'd like to share the story of how the Buddha attained enlightenment and his experience and practice of joy after he attained enlightenment to serve to inspire us how joy can be embodied besides being understood. We know that the Buddha's worldly name is Siddhartha Gautama, and he's referred to as Shakyamuni. Shakya is the name of the clan which his father ruled, and Muni means sage. So Shakyamuni means the sage from the Shakya clan. After leaving home, he visited three renowned scholars of the day and learned from them. Very soon he mastered all their methods, but none of them was the real path of liberation. He then decided to seek ultimate freedom from samsara by himself. So the Siddhartha began the practice of asceticism, which is a very strict way of life. He underwent severe austerity for 6 years in a forest on the bank of a river, living on a grain of rice a day. After realizing the futility of austerity in his search for enlightenment, Siddhartha stopped these practices and took a bath in the river, cleaning off the cumulative dirt of 6 years. And he accepted the milk offered by a shepherd girl and recovered his strength. Then he went to a pipala tree, sat down facing east on a seat made of auspicious grass. He vowed, I will not rise from the seat until I have attained supreme enlightenment. Finally, one night, after defeating moral afflictions and temptations from Maras, which are mental or inner demons, he achieved complete enlightenment and became a Buddha. It is said during the first week after the Buddha's enlightenment, he sat under the Bodhi tree experiencing the happiness of freedom and peace. During the second week, the Buddha stood without moving his eyes from the tree as he meditated on the Bodhi tree, in thanks and gratitude to the tree that had sheltered him during his struggle for Buddhahood. He contemplated on how the tree had held him and cared for him, and also on how joyful his heart was. He then wandered his way to different communities to teach his way of joy. So this is the story about Buddha's joy and enlightenment. Joy is a factor of enlightenment. It is necessary for awakening. It allows us to appreciate the world and invites us to the openness of heart, allowing us to establish connection with the divine, which is part of the whole universe. When we find such sheer joy, we will find this openness and space for us to go anywhere. It is not uncommon that we have people in this world who have gone through so much after so much suffering, but can have so much joy. And I believe it is with sheer joy or the joy of joy itself that we can better care for and tend the world. But how do we understand it? We may associate it with the happy and emotionally intense moments we have had, a reunion with a dear friend, during a happy wedding, at a child's birth, receiving a gift that we actually appreciate. In these moments where we feel is obvious to us. Yet joy can arise in us in many subtle ways. When we gaze at the sunset and sunrise, when we wake up early in the morning and look out of the window and see that the outside world is tranquil and quiet, when we see a person walking on the street smiling upon thinking of something nice or funny, or simply by seeing how an animal walk or sleep brings us joy. And there is this beautiful German word, Einsamkeit, which has no direct translation in English. It refers to the feeling one has while being alone in the woods, the solitude one feels while being in the forest, having a connection with nature, and enjoying the time alone amongst it. That's joy subtly arising in one's heart. In these moments where joy is present, it feels like we just woke up to something. We feel the presence of everything in that moment. The heart is gladdened and awakened. This perception of feeling ourselves being present in those moments is mindfulness. It is in mindfulness and with an open awareness that joy arises. If there's a lack of such mindfulness, open awareness, and open heart, all of those environments and conditions that evoke joy would have no effects on us if we're just ruminating within the walls that our mind builds for ourselves. Mudita manifests in a joyful and appreciative mind or heart. Do we find joy in what we do, in what we see and hear? Do we appreciate what we are learning, what we discovered? Or do we feel worried, sad, or depressed in what we do and in what we learn and what we take into our life? If it's the case of the latter, the practice of joy begins with having the awareness of the presence of these afflicted emotions in ourselves, and then transforming them rather than letting them develop or sustain. Unlike other animals, we humans have developed a cognitive ability for which we pay an emotional cost. Our mind wanders, generating a lot of scenarios that are either not going to happen ever or about events that happened in the past. If we let this monkey mind, puppy mind, or elephant mind wander, whatever you call it, it leads to a misalignment of our perception of reality and reality itself, generating delusions, which keep us from having the right view of the world and of ourselves. Joy has its root in mindfulness, which allows us first to be aware of the mental behaviors that negatively impact our health and well being. And to develop and strengthen mindfulness, it required concentration practice, which we stress repeatedly in our sitting meditation practice. We live in a very challenging world where there is just too much accessible information compared to the time before we had all the technology we have today, which provides a situation where we are surrounded by endless distraction and temptations from Netflix, from all kinds of notifications, from all kinds of applications on our phones. Our attention has never been so fragmented. And when our attention is fragmented, our capacity to be present, to be able to clearly perceive things, perceive this world and ourselves is diminished. When our attention is fragmented, we won't be able to expand our awareness because the mind is too busy reallocating our attention to things that we are aware of we need to tend to. If we constantly shift attention from things to things without proper awareness, the result of this constant reallocation is exhaustion. So, the first step of the practice for mindfulness is to develop and strengthen our attention skills through meditative practice. to explore our potential, our capacity to be fully present, the ability to gather all our attention and at the same time let consciousness rest. So the awareness can be naturally expanded. Like when we are driving, we are focused on the road, on what's in front of us. But we also have a field of awareness that is aware of what's all around us. And in that expanded space, our mind can finally cultivate such a mental space that's able to hold and rest in loving kindness, compassion, and joy. In meditative practices that strengthen our attention ability, we find the answers to questions around how we can embody the four immeasurables and how we can give them to others, to shower others with our loving kindness, our compassion, our joy, and protect others and hold all the space with our equanimity. We can try to recall those moments where we were being held in presence. What does it feel like to be treated with someone's full presence? It may bring a sense of support, unconditional love, empowerment, or even fear out of a sudden realization of a lack of such presence, a lack of such attention in ourselves. Our practice of mindfulness lets us become more open to ourselves, more clear about what's going on within ourselves. When we are open to our own sorrow, anger, and resentful feelings, we know what it is to have compassion and loving kindness. When we are open to our own ignorance, we understand the importance of having wisdom, which is gained through constant constructive reflection. When we are open to our own joy, we know what mudita is, which not only gladdens our heart, but also brings liveliness, appreciation, and meaning to our lives. In mudita, there is a sense of inner freedom, a truthfulness, a genuine feeling of being awake, being alive in every present moment. In the path of awakening to attain enlightenment, joy, like loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity, is not left for chance. It takes proactive practices to nurture the seed of joy in us, to explore the potential of joy that we are born with. In compassion practice, one takes hold of the character of an unhappy person. Your suffering is my suffering. There is no distinction. In mudita practice, one takes hold of the character of a joyful person. Your happiness is my happiness. There's a sense of immediacy in both practices. The joy and compassion are not emotional reactivity, but states of mind that receive and embrace everything and respond with tenderness and gladness. Like the Buddha Shakyamuni's joy and gratitude for the Bodhi tree, his sustaining joy from the ultimate liberation is not an emotional reaction anymore. It became a state of mind, not referring to as a transient or episodic state, but a way of being and an embodiment of this boundless quality. Joy forms an appreciative mind. It is from an egoless place, an abiding pure joy for others' joy. Ego is not involved. This sheer joy provides lightness and freedom and dissolves the heaviness of one's heart. With practice, we are able to abide in joy in all circumstances in our lives. That is, there is an example of a person who was not able to walk for almost a year due to an accident and is able to walk again afterwards. She spoke about the joy she felt the first time she tried to walk after almost 1 year. She fell during the first attempt, like a toddler learning to walk, which actually made her feel peacefully joyful, and understood that this joy she felt is an important lesson that taught her this appreciative state of being, from an appreciative mind for this world, for this body, for this life, For people who have offered help to her, she no longer wants to take anything, any person for granted. Mudita is an embodiment of aliveness, vitality, and calm and peaceful contentment. To abide in joy, this immeasurable quality, is to live with the gentle joy even in the midst of adversity and difficulty. It is an all-encompassing energy covering the immeasurable spectrum of emphatic joy, appreciative joy, and altruistic joy. The cultivation of such joy expands our capacity to honor, celebrate, and rejoice in the happiness and well-being of others, and to appreciate the beauty of this world. Be it something inanimate, joy can be received from the gentle wind and the natural movement of the air when a person swings a swing. Then why not expand the awareness in those moments to expand the pure and egoless enjoyment and celebrate the beauty of being alive, being able to move one's body, being able to receive the soothing feelings that the gentle wind creates when one's on a swing. And there are 2 bullet points regarding cultivating mudita here. In mudita cultivation, the mind needs to reconcile with these 2 kinds of thinking which trap us in certain constructs and make us unhappy or unsatisfied. The first one has to do with our desires and distorted view of reality, as well as distorted view of oneself, which are strengthened by the culture of insufficiency of today's society that sabotages our capacity for joy and freedom. In wanting more in an imbalanced way, being controlled by desires, the mind is lacking appreciation and contentment. Internally, it is the inner voice that tells us that we are not good enough, we don't have enough, or even that we are undeserving and unworthy. What forms such inner voices is our ego. What makes it worse is the lack of awareness of how we respond to such inner voices. When we take those assessments as our reality, it becomes our reality. The more we live this reality, the more we are actually away from reality and have more difficulty to find what's actually important in this life. The other thinking is the dualistic dichotomy of self and others. When this dualistic thinking exists, we cannot help comparing ourselves with others, constantly subjectively evaluating each being's, seeing ourselves better or worse than others, or seeing ourselves the same as others, but we're not happy about any of the results of these comparisons. When the comparison is there, existing mental affliction multiply, creating more confusions, angst, and distress. So again, the practice of joy begins with addressing these afflicted emotions that are present in ourselves, and then proactively work on the right view of the self and of the world, constantly striving to transform the habitual mental behaviors that are harmful to our well-being. Learn to listen to our heart with mental clarity, understanding, and compassion. Learn to pause, step out of scenarios in our minds, and truly see the world and ourselves without filters. Addressing and caring for what is broken and scarred in our body and mind, and hold everything with equal attention and full presence. Gradually, with practice, with patience and diligence in these reflection and meditative practices, which don't always have to be on a cushion in a sitting meditation, but in everything we do, eating, walking, working with others, feeling the touch of breeze brushing our body, in all the living moments, learn to sense the ease, the appreciation, the grounding joy until this appreciative joy becomes a sustaining state of mind, become a way of being. so we become joy as it has always been within us. And lastly, equanimity, Upekkha in Sanskrit, which can be translated as equanimity or impartiality in English. It is a balancing energy with which we cultivate a balanced mind that remains tranquil and steady no matter what we encounter. It carries a sense of detachment, but equanimity is not apathetic indifference that builds walls to shield us from pain. Instead, it gives space to loving kindness, compassion, and joy. It gives space to appreciate everything. So, equanimity, this balancing energy, allows our spiritual practice to stay on track without being a toy of our constant shifting emotions. In Chinese, Upekkha is translated as the mind of letting go. Just like the sky and the earth, clouds can form in the sky and buildings, trees, and cities can appear on the earth. But the sky remains as the sky and the earth remains as the sky, as the earth, regardless of the changes. So Upekkha is even-mindedness, regardless of the changes, not attached to anything and giving space and treating all things impartially at all times. Equanimity is not an easy practice. Everything we do creates results that leave marks on our mind that make us form all kinds of mechanisms and habitual responses, which become constructs and attachments that create limitation and afflictions for us. In our day-to-day life, we do have the awareness of our loving kindness, our compassion, and joy. However, they are usually partial. They are usually projections under the influence of our ego. We commonly have loving kindness, compassion, and emphatic joy only for certain types of beings. As in the closing line, some words by the Buddha that he refers to joy. It is not easy to live in joy and love among those who hate, to live in joy and have a balanced mind among the afflicted and the troubled beings. It requires proactive work on oneself and lead a life of pure love and joy as described by the Buddha. It would be easy, though, to be indifferent when we encounter suffering. We can see, hear, witness all the suffering, but we don't care. This may provide temporary relief, yet in the long run, indifference closes our heart and destroys our own self, as it is a lack of recognition of our own humanity. No self is not the goal of our practice. Genuine selflessness is operated by a self, but an egoless self. So equanimity is not detaching indifference. It's a balanced way of being with pure clarity. The whole point of equanimity practice is to figure out why we need to let go of our attachment and do the action of let go of our attachment to our affectionate feelings, our attachment to our repulsion, which both strengthen the partial and dualistic mind. And also let go of our logic. The logic from our expectations that looks for rewards in what we do. Such logic is an attachment that limits the capacity of our will to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, and joy, because such loving kindness, compassion, and joy are conditioned. So the practice of letting go is a self-purification practice. So are the practices of the other three immeasurables. Equanimity purifies the mind and leaves an even base so that genuine egoless affection can grow. It applies to everything we do, including the mental action of having our faith, which is not transactional. We're not prostrating to the Buddha expecting that the Buddha will bless us. But in doing so, we let go and dissolve our ego. dissolve our attachment to our fear of the impermanence of life, dissolve our attachment to our desires that bring insecurity and afflictions. We prostrate to the Buddha with equanimity, this even-mindedness and serenity, without being desperate or looking for transactional returns. In such moments, if we have equanimity, we already transcend ourselves and overcome the unhealthy coping mechanism that we unconsciously formed previous in our lives. When such a state of mind is attained with full awareness of the attainment, it brings us the state of awakening and liberation, which will give us courage and patience on this challenging path, searching for enlightenment. The four immeasurables are one good family because they support, strengthen, nourish, and balance one another. The quality of metta, compassion, and joy guards equanimity from developing into indifference. Equanimity helps us let go of the unnecessary preferences by likes and dislikes. With an equanimous mind, we find it easier to live in this world of different beings without having to define people by ideas of friends and enemies. In another case, when one is able to love others but not oneself, that is also partiality, which is a limitation for the expression of our capacity to experience and transform. And equanimity supports and strengthens the pure loving kindness and compassion towards others and towards oneself. Through Upekkha practice, we create more space for metta, compassion, and joy, and continue expanding the space within ourselves through equanimity. Thus, they are called the immeasurables. With the expansion of space, introverts or empathic beings, for instance, won't feel uncomfortable or overwhelmed with all the beings and all the energies in this world, while extroverts won't generate attachment to their own social nature. They can socialize more out of free will rather than from a place of need. And beings who struggle with existential questions, who may be overwhelmed by how the world is constructed and how our thinking is constructed, can simply remind themselves that they can still be at peace in not knowing. Understand that such questioning might lead to no end. The mind needs to let go of the need to know. That is the practice of equanimity here. It allows there to be balance in one's mind, no matter what arises internally or externally. It works through the practices of loving kindness, compassion, and joy, and reveals to us the boundless space and freedom. In terms of cultivating equanimity, what it takes is our willingness to meet our lives and understand what causes internal suffering and what brings this kind of suffering to an end. Similar to the practice of compassion, which is not an emotional state but a way of being to understand the world and to let suffering touch our being. Equanimity is a way of being that also requires understanding and, more importantly, wisdom. And it's in our willingness to meet our life, we have the clarity to see, and in such clarity, wisdom can arise. Without wisdom, we might find ourselves trapped in mental entanglement and the consequences of multiplied suffering without understanding why, or not even being aware that we are suffering or aware of the gap between our perception and reality. This willingness in cultivating equanimity leads us on a path to explore our potential and capacity to gain a profound understanding of this life and of all existence. And on the path, we gain wisdom through perceiving and recognizing, for instance, the fundamental sameness of being in the samsara, or this universal vulnerability. So, equanimity is a contemplative practice. It describes a way of being with life that rests upon a profound understanding of interdependence of things, intrinsic nature of change, and law of impermanence. as well as non-self that is at the heart of all things and experiences. So the practice is to try to consider and reflect, can we really, as we look around ourselves and in a heartfelt way, recognize that every sentient being, including ourselves, wishes for liberation. Those we love, those who we have difficulty with, and many beings who we have never crossed paths with who have their own measure of different emotions. We all share the same longings to be free from loneliness, fear, and pain, and no one is exempt from the law of impermanence that brings unwelcome change, uncertainty, and sometimes loss. Equanimity practice is to be in the midst of all this. In happy moments, know that everything is transient, while still genuinely honor and appreciate what are given in each present moment. The practice is also to face the paradox that we care for a person, yet however deep our care, it cannot always protect the person we love from their own mental afflictions. Equanimity helps us understand what loving kindness, compassion, and joy really are. And in the midst of all the changes, merriment, and suffering, if the mind is still able to abide in the four divine abodes, we will find ourselves able to stand through everything, this life and this world, and to embrace the vicissitudes of our life with groundedness and true compassion. To conclude, I'd like to remind us that what we've done in this talk is only conceptualizing the four immeasurables through words. Each of us should, with mindfulness and curiosity, explore ways to embody these qualities. And when we actually embody the four immeasurables, we will know what they really are, what they make us feel. So I thank you for being here with Metta and Mudita. And if you'd like to join me for a short practice, how we conclude a session or talk, discussion, or meditation is to send dedication. We can bring our palms together in front of the chest, forming into the shape of an unopened lotus flower with space in between our palms. You can repeat after me or just listening. May we be well in the midst of the movements in this world. May we be peaceful within the body we have. May we live with kindness and compassion. May we rest in the spacious stillness of the heart. May we gain the unshakable liberation. May the merit of our practice adorn Buddha's lands and benefit all sentient beings. 有缘